Scorching heat waves and droughts, deadly torrential rains, and other natural disasters have plagued the world one after the other. No country is immune to the devastating consequences of climate change. It's a matter of survival. Mankind needs to come together to combat the impact of climate change and protect Earth, the home we all share. This is what it means to build a community with a shared future. Each nation can only overcome an environmental catastrophe if it strictly adheres to its commitments to lower greenhouse gases responsible for global warming.
La réaction est positive, je n'entends pas d'objection. L'accord de Paris pour le climat est accepté.
At the COP21 in December 2015, more than 190 countries jointly signed the Paris Agreement. The landmark document, for the first time, brought all nations into a legally binding agreement to combat climate change and to extend enhanced support to developing countries bearing much of its destructive impact.
The
Paris Conference is not the finish line but a new starting point. As an important part of global governance, the global efforts on climate change can be taken as a mirror for us to reflect on what models to have for future global governance and how to build a community of a shared future.
Developed countries in the global north are responsible for about 79% of greenhouse gas emissions. Ever since 1992, when the UN Earth Summit was held in Rio de Janeiro, developed nations have been called upon to generate a multi-billion-dollar fund to help developing countries tackle loss and damage from global warming.
Poor countries have historically contributed least to global emissions. Developing countries often suffer the most from the devastating effects of climate change, particularly in the form of drought, extreme storms, and rising sea levels, as well as floods. Consequently, developed economies, we hold the view, have a responsibility to support developing economies to enable them to mitigate and adapt to climate change.
After nearly 30 years of obstructing developing nations' efforts, developed nations led by the United States dropped its opposition and agreed to the creation of a specific loss and damage fund at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh in November 2022. China is among the world's developing countries, but it is willing to shoulder more responsibility on climate action.
So, although it's not the obligation of China, we are willing to make our contribution in our effort through South-South cooperation to help other developing countries on climate change, as well as improving their capability in mitigation, adaptation, and other areas. China is already doing that. We already contributed $280 million to help developing countries in this regard.
As of 2021, China has conducted more than 200 foreign assistance programs to help fight climate change and provide energy saving and new energy products and equipment to nearly 40 countries. Some 2 billion yuan or $294 million has been extended to developing countries. More than 2,000 officials and professional personnel specializing in climate response from 120 developing countries benefit from training programs within China's South-South Cooperation Framework. China has also donated equipment to developing countries such as microsatellites, meteorological mobile stations, and drones to support natural disasters, monitoring, and climate adaptation. On the home front, China has pledged to peak its carbon emission by 2030 and achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. As the saying goes, the going may be tough when one walks alone, but it gets easier when people walk together. If humanity is to survive natural disasters aggravated by climate change, countries must adhere to its binding commitments under the Paris Agreement and the UN framework in the spirit of mutual trust and cooperation.